think I'm
They don't realize that they will see it around this point, maybe run the whole thing in there. That's cool. But they use lines and we still are kind of cool. It's really, they hide really well.
All right, we're calling the meeting to order. It's 8:02. Roll call.
Got it.
Okay, so in regards to the agenda for today, we actually have an addition we want to add under I, new business. That would be the cupola restoration. So is there a motion to approve with that addition on the agenda?
So moved.
It's been moved and supported. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Moving on to public comments. Does anyone from the public wish to make a comment? Hearing none. Moving on to the consent agenda, which include the minutes from the August board meeting and the treasurer's report and bill listing. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? It's been moved by Tom. Support by Mindy. Is there any discussion? Anyone that would like to pull anything out and discuss regarding the treasurer's report or bill listing? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Tired crowd this morning.
I really want to say, no one else is eyeing.
Motion carries. The executive committee did not meet in the month of September. There was not a reason to meet. And so we're on to committee reports and minutes. The first committee is the outreach committee, which would be Jeff, but he is not here today.
Jeff and I are working together. Jim sent us an email with the contact info of the volunteers that had previously been on the committee that was associated with the outreach committee. And today I'm going to send out an email to Jeff, Jim, and the volunteers after we leave here with some proposed dates for a meeting and see what works for everybody and try to get that on the books.
On that committee, is it just, are you and Jeff the only board members?
No, there's a couple others, I believe Elizabeth and maybe one other that I can't remember.
Oh, okay, my buddy, okay.
But Jeff kind of asked if I would help kind of co-chair it with him because he's got a lot going on, so.
Yeah,
I said I'd help.
okay, great. All right, so moving on to business development committee.
Well, you want our report?
Do you want to report?
Yeah.
I don't think we've actually scheduled, did you guys have a meeting?
Yeah, I'll report that we did not schedule a meeting, but we're planning on putting together a meeting the next week or two to discuss the first impression meeting that I think most of us made it to. So we were going to use that as kind of a basis for a discussion from there to talk about what they suggested and what maybe we thought was important.
Did you have thoughts on what you were going to propose as like the time of the day and time of the month?
No.
Okay. Is it going to be early? Is it going to be early in the morning?
Do you have a suggestion?
Well, I know that you guys were doing, I think originally we were doing noons at Dan Gerlach's place on Wednesdays, but I would
I'd
prefer to
rather
do
be
it
morning or afternoon, at the beginning or the end of the day.
I agree. I don't want you to do a noon meeting, is what I'm
No.
saying. So if you're going that way, I just want to know.
No.
Okay,
Don't
so
mind.
it doesn't necessarily really matter what day, but if you could do Wednesdays at 8 o'clock, that would be my preference, but just one vote anyway.
I would be interested at least in coming to the Fit Tourism meeting just because that was such an interesting presentation.
Sure.
So if you could shoot me an email
Yeah.
and figure it out, I'd be interested in trying to make it to that.
Okay. Moving on to placemaking committee, Tom.
Jim has summarized our meeting that we had on the 19th, but the main communication for today is we're having our observation walk on the 9th of October. We'll start at 8 a.m. at the Lapeer Agency, which is the old train station, and everyone is welcome to join. We've got some objectives. The main thing is to determine the wayfinding signage and the content, and we'll take those at our next meeting and identify what the criteria is for those.
Is Tim gonna have coffee waiting for us when we start?
Yeah, Leanne told me she have no problem.
So,
Okay, good. Hopefully most of us can be there for
Yeah.
that tour. That'll be, I think, really good. Okay, moving on to the events committee.
They did not meet this month. We had a couple of events that wrapped up. Car cruise wrapped up for the season. It was kind of a rainy day, but we still ended up running 7 cars, which is really good because previously, if it was a rainy day, we would have maybe 5 or 6 if we didn't cancel it. So to have 70 on a iffy day was good. That really been building some momentum. And then, of course, Porch Fest took place this past weekend. It was a rescheduled date. We couldn't have asked for better weather. But it was a great success, I think. We had kind of our guesstimate on it. The best we could figure was about 700 to 800 attendees.
How does that compare to last year?
That would have been more, a little bit more.
Okay. Is the committee gonna like kind of compare just statistics from last year to this year, or was it really a lot from last year to really to gather to compare it?
There wasn't a lot to compare. We did do kind of a follow-up meeting. We'll still do some more outreach. I haven't had a chance to touch base with all the businesses yet. But those that I've talked with, like Doghouse, for example, I met there yesterday for a follow-up. They said it was their busiest day that they've been open.
Right?
Cream and Dagwoods, they
We
had,
half the sales we did last week, so it wasn't as good as I was hoping it would be, but it was still a successful Saturday.
Good.
and Cream and Dagwoods were planning on being open for their pop-up event until 3. They ended up staying open until 6. So there was some positive momentum from it. So like I said, I still haven't had a chance to fully follow up with everybody, but that'll be on my list to work on.
Okay. All right, other reports, nothing on subcommittee business, but Center for the Arts. Joe?
There are some changes at the gallery. The Center for the Arts is now running the gift shop. We changed our programming agreement with the Lapeer Art Association. Their membership drive was suffering because one of the conditions of membership for LAA had been having to work in the gift shop, which people that have a full-time job, that was a commitment that was really difficult. And so we watched a lot of potential members walk out, potential artists to become involved with the gallery. So we've, with full board approval, we changed the agreement. And the Center for the Arts will now also be able to put merchandise in the gift shop. And we have recruited artists from Genesee, Oakland, and Lapeer counties to have. So it's already a fuller gift shop and more continual, not just based on LAA shows. So far, so good. Gallery classes, September was a good month for art classes. I can't give you any statistics because Audience View was down yesterday, and that's Audience View controls all of our information. But I can tell you that we have a 40% increase over last September's classes, so that's pretty good. Because I can give you the financial numbers. In the PICS, the season announcement party was on September 21st from 6 to 8. And ticket sales have been going really well until yesterday when Audience View was down and we could not sell any tickets. As of 11 o'clock last night, Audience View was back online and we did have some ticket sales come through. So hopefully the momentum will continue because it's been going really well and we need it to keep going that way. And I've given you a copy of the upcoming shows. That's the bright, colorful, pretty one. And hopefully I will see you at some of the shows this season. On Friday, we received our grant award notice from Michigan Arts and Culture Council. We scored higher than we've ever scored before, which is fantastic. But Michigan Arts and Culture Council funding was cut by the state. So we received, our award was cut, so we're only receiving 45% of the ask, which is $13,500, which has me gutted, because a score that high last year would have garnered us closer to 20,000. It hurts a lot. It won't affect our budget because I always budget low on grants, because grants, you never know, and an award can't be taken for granted. So I have, speaking of the budget, I've given you a copy of our budget. I did not have one last month, and that was because we discovered an error, a formula error in Excel. So it looks a little crazy because you see there's two columns that say 23-24 budget. The new budget is the blue, the one in blue. The previous one is the one that had the formula error. We've also included the actuals going back to 2019-2020, which was the season before the pandemic, because this season ended, in essence, at the beginning of March, and you can see the numbers were much higher. We are still really suffering from COVID. We have not come back in the manner which we need to. Unfortunately, 2019-2020 was our best year. We were really, things were finally, it was like, okay, we're finally on track, and got to be a big time. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Joe?
Just have a quick one. I really like that you guys are doing the gift shop, because as you know, that's been a concern of mine as an LAA member for a while. But question I had, is any update on the heating and cooling unit for the roof?
None. They can't tell us anything.
Oh my God, you're still waiting?
Uh-huh. Welcome to my world.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's getting chillier out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no heat in the classroom. Yep, just another day down.
All right, moving on to staff report, Jim.
Several things to kind of touch base on real quick. Currently, we are finishing up collecting content for the 2024 edition of our Here Main Street Impact Report. This is the annual report we do in conjunction with Michigan Main Street that every community does. So my goal is to have that finished up and returned back to them by Friday of this week. Also working on and hoping to meet with those of you interested in helping with the asset mapping. Briefly following this meeting, just to kind of come up with a strategy and kind of make sure you guys have the software you need on your phone. And then we'll go from there. It shouldn't take too long.
I couldn't tell from the report, but who are the ones that are going to be doing the asset mapping project?
The ones that, it's open to anybody that wants to
Right.
help. But the ones that indicated to me that they were interested was Ashley, Mindy, and Megan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And anybody else that said they would like to volunteer to that, raise hands, make light work. I did indicate in my report, and I would like to kind of touch base on it. After our FIT presentation at the PITS, it got me thinking about next steps, got me thinking about the FIT team that we currently have. But one thing that it really reminded me of was the Main Street Task Force that we had back in 2019. And one of the questions that came up during that meeting was about working with other communities, other downtowns, other areas out here. I think it's a really good question. And I think it's a really important thing for all of us to do. So I think, it could warrant bringing back that task force in some capacity, whether it is the current FIT team, which is made up of city, DDA, and local restaurant owners, or kind of looking at maybe expanding it and adding county representation on it again, or looking at who might be on So I think that is worth revisiting. So I don't know if that's a conversation we want to have to discuss at our next meeting, or how we want to proceed with that, or if there's any interest in that. And I will also mention that one of my goals, or something that I'd like to see happen with this, is I would love for Lapeer to host the Connecting Entrepreneurial Communities workshop. This is similar to like a downtown association conference or a Main Street conference or like an MML, any type of conference where you're like going, you're brainstorming, you're sharing ideas, lectures, workshops, etc. But what sets the Connecting Entrepreneurial Communities apart is that it is done within the downtown. So instead of going to a conference space or instead of going to like a hotel, you might have a lecture at the Center for the Arts. You might have a lecture at the coffee shop. You might have a lecture at one of our businesses downtown. So like the workshops and the programming is spread out so it utilizes the community. And it's a 2-day conference. Last year's was in Alma. I attended. It was honestly one of, I think, the most positive conferences that I've been to. There isn't one scheduled for 2023. There is a 2024 conference that'll be in Cadillac, but they are looking for a host for 2025. And one of the requirements is that you have gone through the FIT program, because it's an opportunity to talk about what you've done, showcase you as a community. But it's also a good opportunity to invite neighboring communities to kind of talk about what they're doing as well. So it can really be a great boost for the downtown, but also the surrounding area.
Who's responsible for putting this workshop, this 2-day event together?
That was my first question.
Is it the Connecting Entrepreneurial Program, or is it us, or is it a
It's a
combination?
combination.
Okay,
So it's run through MSU Extension.
okay.
And they kind of give like the guidelines, we work with them. But coming up with sponsors is a joint responsibility. Coming up with programming, they rely heavily on us as a community to kind of help pull that together. As far as getting the word out, the promotion, and whatnot, that's where a lot of like the MSU time is focused. So it really is a joint effort.
When you said you were at the last one in Alma, was there a lot of input from other communities? I mean, how well attended was it? Was it just the local, or was it?
There were communities from all over the state there.
Okay.
I would say probably around 200 attendees.
That could be really helpful for our community, for other cities out there to see what we're doing here.
And typically, as far as like the sponsors go, usually there's like a bank sponsor. Usually you can get NBDC to sponsor it in some capacity. MBA, of course, the community as well. And I think, something like 2025, I think is an achievable goal. It gives us time.
It gives you time to put it together.
But what I would recommend, if that is something that we want to look at, one, we want to make sure that, as not only as a project for the DDA, but are other parties interested in helping with this, whether that's the city or the county or other downtowns. And then I would recommend, like a group of us, going to the conference in Cadillac to kind of see how they're running it, maybe talk with them as well, kind of get an idea of what they're doing as far as planning for it. And then, of course, there'll be multiple conversations with MSU Extension for that as well.
Is it like a bid process almost, where towns submit like a packet and say we are interested? Like how are you selected, I guess?
Yeah, so they ask, like, who's interested in hosting? Requirements are, if you've taken part in the FIT program, and then they kind of want to know like a general overview of what you're looking to do.
So we're doing like a proposal kind of?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because they might get, they're not going to get a lot, but they might get 3 or 4 communities that are interested in hosting, because it's limited to, you have to have already done FIT.
Mhm.
You're limited to how many communities.
Right.
Is there a deadline as to when we would need to let them know?
They would like to announce the 2025 community at the Cadillac conference,
Which is
which is
when,
in May of 2024. So we would want to let them know. I don't know the exact deadline. I don't think they've even identified the exact deadline yet. But we would want to probably have a pretty good idea here amongst ourselves if we even want to apply.
so I missed the first part, this connecting entrepreneurial, whatever you call it. Who actually is running it? Is it the MEDC? Is it the, who is running it?
MSU extension.
Oh, MSU is actually the one that runs the whole program.
Yes.
Do you have an idea of the cost of this? Like how much money you'd have to raise to, how many sponsors?
I don't. I can see if I can get some kind of information on that. I think it probably does vary from community, kind of depending on what we want to put into it. Alma, they had little coasters and crickets or whatnot for attendees, but that's covered by sponsorship. Food, usually they have a couple general sessions, so those are catered, so it's lining that up,
Right.
as well. So.
Are there other questions about this particular idea? Does anybody have any thoughts on whether we think it's a good idea?
I like the idea.
Is there a cost of attendance in addition to the sponsorships? Like, is that another?
Yeah,
Will you help cover
the
costs?
registrants have to pay the cost for registering, just as any other.
This might be a good discussion, especially since you might want to have other partners involved. This might be something, if we do the task force, we revive it, I should say, maybe that would be something that would be one of their projects.
Kind of why I put them back to back on my report is because I think that, whether it's the FIT team or the Main Street Task Force, I think, that's kind of the ideal group to kind of lead that conversation.
Does anybody have any thoughts on reviving the Main Street, the Main Street Task Force? This was back in, was it 18 or 19? I don't remember when we did
It
that.
started in 2018. It was most active in 2019.
Right, before COVID.
They worked on the branding significantly at that time.
So like Jim said, I mean, there was basically 4 partners in that group. And that included the county, the city, the DDA, and the chamber. Obviously there's been some changeover in the county. So it might be worthwhile to try to reach out. I mean, obviously Brad Hagedon is our representative now. It might be worth looking at that and trying to build on those partnerships locally. It doesn't mean we can't utilize some of the, representatives that you have on the current FIT group.
Right.
So we could maybe modify it a little bit, but is anybody opposed to looking at that? Okay.
I don't know how much effort I would put into it, knowing, the communication between the various parties, but it's a great idea. It works, but
Yeah, as somebody that was actually a part of that task force, it was just very difficult to get people together.
that's kind of where I'm going with it.
Yeah, and I think at the time, our county rep, who was very much on board, I love Lenny, he didn't always have the support from the others that, the other county representatives. So, again, there's been some change there, so, maybe it would be worthwhile to look at that again, but I think at least we should have a discussion.
Yeah.
So maybe the group that's the FIT group,
Right.
I keep thinking of this athletic.
Right, they're the.
Can actually discuss that and talk about it. So
Absolutely.
So who's the FIT, who's part of the FIT
So
group?
for FIT, it is myself, it's Rodney Church from the Parks Department. Josh Atwood is the commission representative. Samantha Warren is the business representative, and then Peyton Cortez is our youth representative.
So I guess, is there anybody from here that is on the
Just
group?
me.
Just you? So I mean, I think it would be nice to have a board member or 2 on the group. So if anybody's interested in participating in that, let Jim know.
Let me know, yeah.
Yeah,
Because we'll be doing a follow-up just focused on FIT and talking about next steps, so I can include you in that conversation.
I didn't acknowledge that our city manager was here, so good morning, Mike. How are you? Did you want to add anything to that discussion?
I'm not enjoying an hour-long commute.
Okay.
A couple more things that I wanted to touch base real quick. The city is working on a parking study for the downtown area. And I met briefly with Jason Ball yesterday to kind of get an idea of their goal and then talk about potential community partners to bring in for the downtown. So there's a community that I'll be reaching out to just to kind of have an initial conversation on if we kind of move forward with that project. Also, I'm meeting this afternoon with the Oddfellows. They recently had a space open up in their building downtown where Dance Street Studio was located. And so they would like some feedback as to what the DDA would like to see in the downtown area or some possible uses for that particular space. I will be meeting with the DDA directors from Elmont and Emerald City, as well as Sam Moore from the LDC, the second week of October. And then just a reminder, next week, Monday and Tuesday, I will be out of the office for the Main Street Directors Retreat. Tomorrow, I will be working from home because I have a chimney sweep coming to finally fix and clean our fireplace for the first time in like 5 years. So last thing I have is for Main Street accreditation. For us here in Lapeer, that is October 17th is when that is taking place. They would like to meet with the board, the DBA board. They're only looking for an hour of our time. So what I need to know to kind of put together the agenda is what is best. Is morning best or would afternoon be best?
For me, when my kids are in school, it's best, so between like 9 and 2.
Anybody else have?
I'm open.
My preference is afternoon, so if we could do between like 12 and 2 to follow up with Elizabeth, that's great. That's my morning getting in court, so I wouldn't be able to do necessarily like between 9 and 11, but I could do 12 to 2.
Anybody else? Does that work if I propose 1 o'clock? Okay. All right. That is it for me. Any questions?
Any questions? Okay. There is no new, well, actually, I'm taking that back. There's the new business, which we added, which was the cupola restoration. We wanted to talk about.
Yes. So, as you recall, our annual giving campaign last year was focused on the planters and the cupolas that are around the downtown area. We were able to bring in several thousand towards that. And I did get a quote from the Parks Department for the restoration of the cupolas. Essentially, it comes down to $500 each, which would bring the total cost for 13 cupolas to $6,500. We originally anticipated the cost being about $5,000 to do those, but with the cost of like construction supplies and whatnot, that cost has come up. So the caveat to that is when we were doing our budget this year, we forgot to put cupola restoration in there. And so we did our annual giving campaign focused on that. We made a promise to the community that that's what we want to do with those funds. So we would need to do a budget amendment for that. But if you recall, for our budget this year for income, we anticipated $345,000. On the expense side, we anticipated about $320,000. So we do have a little bit of flex space, although we also don't really know what the year is going to look like. But I would like to see us follow through on this commitment. So I think it's an important one to demonstrate that, we asked the public to help cover the costs on this, and that we follow through.
So it's not that we didn't, it felt like we budgeted 5, but and we didn't budget 65 because we didn't know there was gonna be additional costs. We didn't budget
We didn't
anything.
budget anything for it, yeah. And so the other question would be, if we do decide we want to do this project, they're ready to move forward with it. The Parks Department reached out, got proposals for it. J&G Painting and Renovation is who they would like to utilize for it. Then we would have to decide, do we stick with the 5,000 and only do 10 of the 13 cupolas, or do we want to add the 1,500 and do all 13 so that they're done?
What was our actual increase for the annual giving campaign last year?
When you add the $1,000 contribution from the community foundation, we came in at 4,500. But we also did have some grant funds outstanding from the previous year that were supposed to be used for this.
But didn't we use some of that money though for planter boxes?
Yes.
So how much is really left then
Well,
for?
So we actually ended up giving the same amount that we usually give for flowers, and Parks covered the rest for that in their budgeting. So we gave the Parks Department their annual give, which was I think it's the 1,500, which we budget for separately. So actually, of about that 4,500 that we got, actually none of that went to outside of what we would normally give to them.
Okay, so how much money, I guess the question is, how much
Sorry.
money do
So
we have left for the?
we would have 4,500 left.
We would have 4,500.
Are the
Okay.
cupolas all in the same condition? In other words, is this something we could work on the worst first and finish up next year, or?
I think, well, condition varies from cupola.
Right.
Cupola, some are worse than others, and depending on the location. I think if we do it, I think the biggest impact is doing it all at once and getting it done. It's a flat rate of 500 per cupola. Doesn't matter like what the condition is, but I think that takes into account that some can be worse than.
I agree, but if we'll got a case of the shorts here, maybe that's.
Well, and I would almost be worried or wondering how much would it cost next year, because I'm sure the quote isn't gonna be good for the whole year if we cut down on the quantity, and then we're like, oh, we have 4 more that you
Right.
need us to do, is it gonna still be 500?
Well, I said maybe
apiece?
they'll increase the cost. for
Right,
painting.
exactly, so, and if we have, a $25,000 surplus right now?
That's what we're projecting.
I think if we have the 40, my opinion, if we have the 4,500 from last year, I agree that I would rather do the impact and not worry about the cost increasing if we don't do all of them this year. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, so does anybody else have any comments about what they would like to do?
I was
Elizabeth?
kind of all worried about the cupolas. What about the benches? I mean, the benches are adorable.
And I
Is
think
there any
the
way that
benches
you
are
could-
something we can discuss for next budget year, because I think that fits our art and culture project. But this is something that we specifically put in our annual giving that we were going to do.
Tom? Any
I
comments?
agree, we do them all at the same time.
Megan?
Well, I think even just one person sees that one of them doesn't look like the other, and it will be a whole thing.
Criticism.
Yeah.
Or were they
And it's
changing
one
the
where they worry
design
about
on it?
next year.
Were they changing the design or the color thing? Okay.
Yeah, this would be a restoration.
So if we do a budget amendment, would it be under the CBD beautification line item, or would it be? Yes. I'm just wondering when we would do the.
I'm in favor of doing the budget adjustment and doing them all. Keeping it uniform.
So is there a motion for a budget amendment to change the line item for CBD beautification from 1,500 to 8,000? I did a quick math there. 8,000.
I move that we amend the CD, which was it, CBD?
CBD.
CBD beautification budget to 8,000.
All right.
Letters.
Central business.
And
Okay, thank you.
Tom
I was
supported
wondering
that.
about
Oh,
CBDs.
okay. All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Then we're on to old business, historic designation, CLG, certified local government. I know we had this presentation a couple of months ago. We ran out of time talking about it last month. So it's on the agenda to talk about this month and what everybody's thoughts are, if you remember the presentation from 2 months ago. So
I
do
did
you want to kind of
include-
summarize?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did include some information in your packet, just kind of a general breakdown on what's the difference in national register versus local designation. And it's got some general information on that itself. But ultimately, what we want to look at is, do we want to propose and make recommendations to the city for exploring certified local government? There are pros and cons to it. And I think Alan did a pretty good job kind of covering a lot of that information. If we want to pursue historic designation for the downtown area, being a certified local government opens up grant opportunities that can cover those costs. If we do not pursue certified local government, then those costs, either the time and the work falls on us to do, which can potentially take years, or we bring in an outside party to do the surveys, put the nomination together. But that can be upwards of $40,000. It's a significant effort. With historic designation, that opens up grant incentives, whether it's through certified local government or federal listing. One of the things we learned from Alan's presentation is the majority of those grants cannot be used for privately owned buildings. In fact, the only one that can be used for privately owned buildings currently would be the Edward Braun grant, which we would have to apply for through the National Parks Service, which would be a grant awarded to either like the DDA or the municipality that could then be awarded to private property owners for work on the building. Beyond that, the incentives for private property would be tax credits. Michigan has tax credits for commercial property as well as residential properties. And then the federal government has tax credits for commercial properties. Both of those are capped, so once they hit their cap each year, then funding or tax credits are closed for that year. So they aren't very competitive. The other thing with historic designation is sometimes that does mean more cost for property owners as well. If you receive a grant, there's reporting criteria. But also with local ordinance, there could potentially be more cost increase on property owners because of the types of materials they use or the process that they have to go through. It does take, if we were to go or recommend certified local government, it takes the creation of a local historic commission, as well as a historic ordinance. So there would be work to be done with the city, and the city might decide, like, no, it's not a good fit for us. I think, looking at or kind of being dangerously familiar, but not perfectly familiar with the ordinance as it stands for the downtown right now, I think a lot of the design requirements that we currently have reflects what we want to see or what the state would want to see in a historic ordinance. So I don't think there would actually be a lot of change in that capacity. I think they would be pretty similar. It would just be adopting that. The other thing that Alan mentioned, is you can create your CLG, you can create your historic ordinance, and that opens you up to applying for the different grants and opportunities. But it also doesn't mean that you ever have to use it either. It just gives you that opportunity to.
And that's my question I was going to ask, is that because, there's a difference between, saying you're a CLG, establishing this commission, but being provided those grant opportunities, but then not actually establishing an historic ordinance, which is a whole different animal. So that's really I want to clarify for myself, is that actually what he's saying, is that you can be a CLG, a certified local government, you can have that designation, you can, the city can establish this commission and appoint people, but you're not required to actually have a local historic ordinance. But then you can still, because of that though, you still can have the grant opportunities, you can, which is why I would think most of the reason we're doing this in the first place is to have those grant opportunities. So we're gonna have those grant opportunities to get that funding, but not actually have to necessarily have a local historic ordinance. Is that what you're saying?
Well, and what I maybe thought I heard, which was similar, was that you can do the ordinance, but not necessarily enforce the ordinance, was what I picked up, but.
Or why would, that would make
Why would
sense to
you
me.
have
Why would you
one?
have one then?
You can tailor the ordinance to what's beneficial for the city, right, Jim?
Yeah, there is some flexibility as to what the city is looking for on it. It's kind of, mostly it's up to them to identify those. So,
But am I wrong though, is that there is a possibility that if we say that, we tell the city, we would like to be a CLG, and let's say the city says, okay, that makes sense based upon what we're doing downtown. They designate, we do the paperwork to be designated as a CLG, and they create the commission. We're not required to have a historic, local historic ordinance to be able to get those grant opportunities. That's what I thought the presenter said.
I think, and I can follow up with him for clarification. There's kind of two polls for like discussion. One, are there any additional questions that I can't answer that I can forward on to Alan to get feedback? After that presentation, I did send out an email with all the information and asked if anybody has questions. I didn't get any back, so I didn't know what to ask them. So I'm hoping to get some of those today as well, because I think this is going to be a conversation that might take today, it might take 2 meetings to get as kind of questions come up. But I also want to get people's concerns as well, so that we have those.
I think it was a complicated enough, there was a lot of information that was being disseminated by these individuals and they were great, but I think it was crammed into a very short time period. And I think, I don't know if it would be helpful to everybody else, but even if it's on some type of Zoom thing, it'd be helpful, I think, to hear from him again and be able to ask questions, because, it's great that you take those questions back, but if we're not hearing it directly from them, I don't think it's as helpful to us. I think it would be helpful to have them come back and be more deep, maybe have, maybe set aside, just say, this is all we're doing for today is doing this question and answer session with them. I don't know. I don't know if anybody else feels the same way, but
I
felt
think
like I
we should
didn't
shut
have-
this down right now. When I listened to that presentation, what I heard was, we're from the government and we're here to help. And I see absolutely no benefit to anybody for this. And speaking as a property owner, I see nothing but that. We don't need this in any way, shape, or form. We have a planning commission, we have a DDA. What do we need the federal government for? Our local property owners aren't going to get any benefit out of it. And, speaking as someone that's got a relatively large stake in the downtown, I'm 110% against this. And I can tell you, Buddy's about 150% against it. It's funny, I was in Charleston a couple of years ago in the Oyster Bar, and there was a bunch of locals kind of sitting around us, sort of a big party, and they got talking about this. And, well, I'll tell you what, if you want to start another civil war, bring something like this into Charleston, they absolutely hated it. They regretted having anything to do with this historical stuff through the federal government because of all the red tape and the things that people have to go through to change anything on their building. I mean, we have a planning commission and we have a DDA. I don't see any reason we need anything like this to just add another layer with really no benefit to the local property owner.
The benefit would be in the form of tax credits, primarily.
Well, but that's limited, and I don't see that as a benefit that outweighs the potential problems.
The other would be if we were to be able to pursue the Braun grant and receive a Braun grant. One of the things that the joint meeting.
Yeah, but Jim, there's so much more involved here. There's so much
There's
more. We're
reporting
talking
requirements and
ordinances,
criteria
we're talking
for
bringing the
grant.
federal government in. I mean,
Can I
this,
ask a quick
this is
question?
the
Because
last
you keep
thing we
saying
need.
the federal government, and for the National Register, I do see that the legal authority and the administrators, the federal government, but for the local historic district, it says the legal authority is the Michigan Historic District Act. So I think the certified local government is more of a state-run program
It's a
versus.
national program, but it's run at the state level.
Okay. Thank you, because I wasn't sure, because I saw the
As soon
state
as
thing.
as soon as you get the federal government involved, they're involved. I mean, there's no two ways around it. And I think if you took a poll, if you talked to property owners in the district, you would get a pretty much a resounding no. Anybody that's got any basis or experience with this sort of thing is probably gonna say, do not do it.
Well, I guess I'd like to, maybe we have some type of public presentation or we do some type of survey, because I'd like to know what people think. I mean, I understand that you disagree with this, Tim, and I
I'm
appreciate
not the
that.
only one, trust
But,
me.
well, right, but I'm saying, I think we need to hear, maybe we need to present this as an idea to our community, our local business community, property owner community, so that we get that feedback, because we're not gonna know otherwise.
How do you propose doing that?
A public forum or a public presentation. so-
Yeah, how many
Yeah.
people do you think are gonna show up? I
Well,
mean,
then obviously, if they don't,
That they're
if
not
they
very
know that's on the
interested.
agenda, they know that that's something we're considering, I would think there'd be tons of people here.
Tom's committee talked about this, and they were of the same opinion.
Tons.
What we determined was some next steps. We're very cautious, but we have to be optimistic about it as well, right, Jim? So one of the things that we had on our agenda is to go around and talk to the owners of the buildings, because they are the ones that are gonna be directly affected. It's not the businesses they'll be directly affected if the cost goes up, right? But one of the items we had, and we haven't finalized it, is to go around and talk to the individual businesses. Because I don't know how effective having a forum would be, whether they participate or not. And if that means myself and some of the placemaking committee people knocking on doors and getting feedback and presenting it to the committee, that's probably the first step, I think. I don't disagree with what you're saying, at all, but I want to be optimistic and at least look at all areas of this before we just rubber stamp it and say, well, that's what I'd like to do.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I just think that, the idea of a forum, it's just
No,
not gonna
and-
work.
no,
It's just not, there's no chance.
One of the takeaways that we discussed is if we have a CLG, we can define what that ordinance looks like. So in our meeting, Jim gave the task to me to get with the planning commission and actually do a deep dive into that ordinance. And is that something that could be the CLG? We agreed as a committee that without a CLG, there's no way we'd entertain any of this. We're not gonna let them determine what we can and can't do in the city. I agree with you, it's going to drive cost potentially. And it's a deterrent because if you look at the percentage of private businesses or buildings that are owned versus city owned, the majority are not in favor of it. The first thing is just no. If you're gonna add cost, it's difficult enough to do things sometimes in the city, whether it be colors and windows and things like that.
Just adding another layer to
Yeah.
people's problems.
But I think we need to peel the onion back one or two more layers, do a deep dive, and then we can make a consensus on how to proceed.
Okay, so I want to ask my original question, which was, do we need to hear from the people that came here from the state office for more information? Does everybody feel comfortable with the information they've received, that they have a full understanding of it? Or do we want them to, kind of represent, maybe summarize, get our questions answered? Or do we want to, because I don't know if I even know like all the questions I want to send to Jim to have him relay. I almost feel like, maybe if it's on a phone, like a Zoom call or something, where we could not take up so much of their time, but we could get on a Zoom call and kind of hear from him again. But I just need to know, I know Tim doesn't want that But what else is everybody else saying?
I feel like in my brain, and maybe this is just how I process things, I feel like I'm probably more on your side, guys, just because I'm a little afraid that as a business or property owner, that it's just one more, now I have to please not 2 or 3 entities, but 4 or 5, and it just gets complicated and expensive. But the way I process things, I feel like there are lots of acronyms and categories and departments that get thrown around, and I would like to see some sort of a flow chart or diagram, because I'm not sure which existing entities we're talking about and which new ones we're talking about, and like a very neutral pro-con list. These would be the advantages. Because there's the historic district, but then there's also the certified local government, and like, sometimes I think it gets kind of murky, and I've been here in meetings and I've been hearing this stuff, so I think if we were going to take it to other property owners, we would need a very clear presentation, and then we would also need to allow them some time to process it, and some might hear me like, nope, but I personally like to kind of let things soak a little bit and then say, yes. Because also, if you're thinking of historic district for the city, I could say, yes, I want to help the city by doing that. But then as soon as you talk to me about my personal space, I'm like, nope, I don't want to do that. So I would need time to kind of weigh that out. So I think I do want to hear from other people. I think I just want a clearer understanding of what exactly everything is.
So do you want me to invite Alan back to another meeting, or do you want me to work this to set up a Zoom call for those that intend?
The
I
proper
frankly
treatment
don't
would
know
be
what
that.
we didn't hear the first time. I just find this.
I think it was a
Kind of
lot of
done.
information. I actually don't remember. I know he did have some type of chart where he kind of like distinguished between different ones, because you were talking about that. But it was 2 months ago and it was done so quickly. I honestly, maybe if we'd have had some like handouts where we could have studied it afterwards,
I'm
it
a
would have been
visual
helpful.
person. and
But
that
I don't
way-
recall, I can't remember all of it,
I
so.
think this thing in our packet's pretty good. I think it plays, it's pretty well encapsulated.
And that might be
Everything
like,
is
I need to
talked
maybe
about.
go back to previous
You know,
meetings.
Right,
And if
so.
we sat through the presentation and it's confusing, we don't understand, how's it gonna be for the guy down the street that owns the building that, you know,
Well, I mean, I guess I think that if we are not I mean, I guess when I make a decision, I want to make sure I understand it fully before I say yes or no. And I think that if we're not comfortable with what we've got, we are fully understanding all the aspects of this, I think it would be helpful to have him come back. And if we can have him come back, that would be the perfect scenario. But if that's too difficult for him to do, then we could try to do a Zoom call instead.
I have a question just for a point of clarification. How many properties downtown are owned by local people versus people that might live in like Bloomfield Hills? Yeah. Is everybody who's invested in the downtown a local person, or are there owners that aren't local? And this is just like a property that,
I mean, there are property owners of buildings downtown that are not local, that they're out of town.
is it like 30%?
I don't know what the percentages.
Does anyone know?
I don't know the percentage currently.
Okay.
I know it has shifted to more locally owned than what it was, but I do not know the percentage.
if I just mentally take a walk up and down Nepson Street, I'd have to say probably at least 70%.
So 70%.
75, something.
Because to me, that changes things as well, because then you have people who really, their flesh and blood is here versus somebody who is like, I don't care, is it making money?
Yeah. So I didn't ask what Megan, Elizabeth, what are your thoughts about having this person come back or do a Zoom call?
I think it was a little bit overwhelming, like you said, everything. I think the graphics are good, but if someone were to ask me specifics about the program as far as trying to design it and do that, I don't think I know enough. But I think the Zoom meeting would be good. I don't know if I could commit to another in person, just because I can see it would still kind of work.
Well, it would be at this board meeting. It would be at a
Okay.
regular, yeah, it wouldn't be an
Okay.
additional meeting.
Okay.
But that's what I'm saying, if it was a Zoom meeting, probably we'd have to do a separate meeting. It would be it would be Zoom, but it would be different from the board meeting.
That's what like I said, I don't feel like I 100% get it to where I could explain it or even try and get feedback from someone.
Right.
But I don't know necessarily if it'll hold the meeting too. I feel like the information we got in our email yesterday should have been at their presentation. Like that would have been a lot more beneficial to me. So I don't know.
So Elizabeth, what is your opinion?
I just feel like I don't even have an opinion. This doesn't really have anything to do with me personally.
Okay. So you don't care whether we have somebody come back and,
I'll listen to it again, but I'm not excited about it.
all right,
Or-
Tom, are you okay with somebody coming back or no?
I guess my only opinion is if we do have them come back, we need to make sure that we have the right audience. And how do you put this politely? You can't have people making decisions for a CLG that don't own buildings, because it directly affects the building owners. And then, Jim, we talked about this before. So as we move forward or down this path, you've got to get the people that are going to be directly affected to help us or guide us make that decision. You can't have the people that,
I agree, but we also need to understand, but so to your point, I guess, if we had, let's say this guy could come back at the end of October, could the placemaking committee not do something next month in October before that meeting to go around and knock on doors, reach out to property owners to get their input about what their feelings are about
I
this?
feel like the asset mapping team would be a better choice for that because we would be going around and kind of assessing the downtown area anyway. And,
Good idea.
you know,
Yeah.
That you might already be engaging with property owners.
Right.
Yeah, that's a
So-
good idea.
if we could, and I feel like if we have him back, obviously, we would all need to study whatever information we have, because when he was here the first time, it was all brand new.
Yeah.
Now that we have some information, we would go have some time to read over it more and come at him with different, more thoughtful questions.
And hopefully you would have that feedback from those property owners to be able to, that's part of our consideration when we're making a decision. So, and again, this just has to be a meeting to like listen more. I mean, we don't necessarily make a decision at the end of that meeting or that presentation. I just think it's important that we fully understand the process.
The one thing that stood out to me, while everything at the FIT presentation seemed very positive, there was one comment that stood out to me. And it was that for being called historic Lapeer, they expected more history.
Right.
And that one thing made me think about this, because I was like, we are branding ourselves as historic Lapeer, but a tourist, from out came out and said, I want to find history. And they were like, well, there's not a whole lot of history here. So
My
Just something
my
to
takeaway on that was slightly
think about.
different.
Okay.
They're not saying the history isn't here.
it's not well
We're just not.
advertised.
it's all these guys that can
Okay.
use it. There's history.
Well, and I get there's history here, but the people weren't able to find the history, I guess is a better way to put it.
So I don't think we need, we could have a motion on whether or not we want this person to come back. But is there a consensus? Is there a majority of us that want this person to come back so we can hear what they have to say?
I would be okay with him coming back. I don't feel like it's a time crunch to make this decision, so if
Right,
he
it's
comes back like in December, that just gives us more time.
Okay.
And I would say, again, I'm leaning in favor of the no designation, or the no vote, but
Okay.
I would like more time to really understand it and think through it, because I want to make a non-reactive decision, not just, this is my gut.
Well, and my question is, they've obviously sold some communities on this. So what is it that they did in those communities that either got people on board or made people mad so that we can try to, if we are going to move forward with it,
Yes.
try to avoid doing the things that didn't work in other communities, you know what I mean?
I'm not sure you're gonna get that from them.
How do we,
How do we find, we can find out what communities we could go to those
So-
communities.
Right.
have to
So-
speak with those communities and see if they benefit?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
And what they would
Coldwater
do.
just completed their CLG process. I could reach out to Audrey.
But we need somebody that's had it in place, not somebody that's
Well,
brand new.
Yeah, and that's my point, though. We have some that just completed it, like Coldwater. Somebody like Bay City has been a CLG for many years. Charlevoix, I believe Lake Orion is, I know they do have a historic district there, but I can check with them. I mean, we can get a list of who currently is a CLG community and kind of get that information from them.
That would be helpful as well.
Get
I
somebody
think so,
up in
to hear it in
Charleston, South
practice,
Carolina,
you know.
we'll hear about it.
Right. All right, so I think most of us agree that it would be, whether it's next month or in November or December, it would be helpful to have our individuals come back, discuss more with us the benefits, pros and cons of this program. And then hopefully the asset mapping committee can actually elicit from the property owners and within our community, what their feelings are. And we'll go from there. Okay, moving on, board member comments. Any-
You have just one update. It's not on the agenda because we're not looking to fill it today, but we do have a vacancy on the board. If you're not here, Bailey did step down, so we have one opening.
Do we need to have a motion to accept that resignation, Kim? No, okay,
No, they do that at the city commission level.
okay. So maybe just kind of think about other individuals that would be good to be on this committee or on this board so that we can make a recommendation to the city commission. Any other board comments? Okay, we have no correspondence, so is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thanks.
And then we're talking about the asset mapping.
Yeah, you're helping with the asset mapping.
Did you hear from?
No, she didn't call me back. I left her a detailed voice. Is she here?
I think so.
Okay. I got a 9:30, but I can run in there and just see if she heard my voicemail and if she has any. I don't actually have a contract with me. I was looking at that when I left the message, so I might hopefully I'll.
You just have the general question.
Yeah, yeah. All right, see you guys later.
We'll see.
I'll see you Monday, right? Monday? No, it's not Monday. It's a week from Monday. The walking tour.
Yeah, we can Monday. Yeah, it's still.
Right. All right.
All right. Want to gather around one spot?
It's so cold in here.
It's chilly.
Yeah.
That's
That's why I put Elizabeth says, the people here.
Where's a good spot, Jim?
Yeah, where do you want to go over here?
Head down there, more chairs, I'd probably easier to sit.
All right.